20-something, and someone would ask me, well, what do you do? And I'd say, well, I play music. But I never really planned to be a musician as such. It was only I was totally preoccupied with music, and I discovered that for people with my kind of affliction, the easiest way to talk about it would be to say, I'm a musician. In fact, I'm not a musician. I'm not even interested in that, but I am totally interested in music. Totally interested in music in every way. The AACM was a vibrational template that allowed for all these different currents to go through itself without establishing any kind of solidified two-dimensional position about anything. You were free to think about things the way it made sense to you. And yet you were a part of something that was dedicated to your right to be able to do what you want to do. Began to experience the New York scene, and I found myself thinking, wow, there is creativity here. There is acceptance here. There is diversity here. There is dedication here. However, it's with the chess players, not with the musicians. I was totally turned off by the music scene. I found the music scene in New York to be full of cliques. The beboppers didn't speak to the so-called free musicians. The musicians uptown didn't speak to the downtown musicians. There was no communication between, for instance, Philip Glass, Steve Reich, and guys uptown like Sauberger or Davidowski. And I loved them all. There was no communication between the cage musicians and some of the musicians working in theater music. And I was interested in all of it. The black musicians didn't work with the white musicians. And of course, no one included women. And so, at the Manhattan Chess Club, there was no problem at all. We were all excited by Spassky and Fischer. Who needed the musicians? And so I quit music in that period and decided to devote myself to a life in chess. And so I made my living hustling potzes in Washington Square Park, and I would then lose my money to masters or grandmasters, but I was at least learning. Try as I might, there was no slot for a musician who wanted to define his own terms and evolve his music in a way that was consistent with my own interests. And so as I laid on the floor in the basement in New Haven after we had lost our home in the late 70s, we bought a home, Nikki and I, but we never paid the first payment because everything collapsed, every gig collapsed. We moved into what could only be called artistic debt, conceptual debt. It became so far out that Citibank had our neighbors, people we didn't even know, come by and say, oh, we just got a call from Citibank and they asked you to please come and pay your debts. And so as I laid on the floor in the basement in New Haven, asking the creator for some kind of insight on what I should do, since at this point I had 3 children. We had already been told that if I didn't get a job in the next month, they were going to kick us out in the street. I had one solo concert 6 months away for $800 that I was pretty sure they would cheat me out of the $800 and I would probably only get $400. I found myself thinking, what's next? It was as if we were on a cliff, and suddenly a telegram came. It was David Rosenboom saying, come to Mills College. I said, Mills College? Academia? I hate academia! Where's the ticket? Tri-centric, past, present, and future. Mutable, stable, transpositional. Improvisation, composition, ritual. Past, present, and future. Known, unknown, intuited. The number 3 on the triplane, which is also what I'm trying to describe. 3 as a primary unit. Tri-centric, man, woman, and children. Suddenly you're in the house of Trillium. I was at a point in my life where intellectually interesting was not enough. I was not interested in the intellectualism or the abstract intellectualism of the 1950s or the serialists or this way of thinking about music. The wonderful thing about opera, you have this narrative dynamic, you have a poetic dynamic, you're dealing with people singing and storytelling. It's three-dimensional. For me, I was still interested in tri-centric storytelling in the sense that all of the stories in the Trillium opera are affirmations of the schematics from the Tri-AACM writings. You have 4 schematics at the end in the little booklet of the opera, and those schematics relate to the Tri-AACM writings in terms of the philosophical argument. I think attraction is the subject, the internal subject, or the systemic subject of Trillium Aura, Shallow Fields for the Poor. But the real subject is attraction. It's really like a three-dimensional philosophy book. It's a story about the fulfillment of a schematic of a particular philosophical argument. That's what the Trillium system is. I'm in between the isms. Part of the price of being in between the idioms is that people worry about your allegiances. And plus, to make matters worse, I'm very fortunate. When I think about my own work, for instance, I've never wanted to be in a position where my work is greeted in the middle. And I've discovered in the last 40 years that my work is either embraced or it's hated. There's no middle ground. How fortunate I am that my work doesn't provoke a mediocre response.